Steve Harvey broke down on live TV after Jungkook said one unexpected sentence. No one could have predicted what came next. "Don't ask me that unless you're ready to cry," Jungkook warned, his voice low, steady, but shaking ever so slightly. The room fell into a strange hush. The glitz and glamour of the talk show set, gleaming under a dozen stage lights, suddenly felt irrelevant. Steve Harvey, leaning forward with the warm smile he wore like a suit of armor, didn't laugh. He didn't flinch. His eyes scanned Jungkook's, searching for something he couldn't name. The cameras kept rolling. Jungkook exhaled. Then he said it. "My father never heard me sing." The silence was brutal. A single tear escaped from Steve Harvey's eye before he could catch it. His hand slowly covered his mouth, as if trying to hold in the floodgate of emotions rising in his chest. Everything that followed, the gasps from the audience, the producer whispering frantically into his mic backstage, the way Jungkook's voice cracked as he tried to go on, was a blur. But in that exact second, something cracked open between the two men. Something raw, ancient, unspoken. The cameras didn't blink, and neither did Steve. Earlier that day, Jungkook had almost canceled the interview. In his dressing room, he'd sat stiffly in the sleek leather chair, eyes locked on his reflection. His makeup artist tried to lighten the mood. "You look sharp today, Kook. This suit's gonna kill it." He smiled faintly but didn't reply. His fingertips drummed nervously on his thigh. In the mirror, his eyes weren't the eyes of a superstar. They were a little boy's eyes, tired, cautious. Then came the knock. His manager poked his head in. "They're ready." Jungkook swallowed something dry and heavy in his throat. Something shaped like grief. Now, under the glare of stage lights, that grief had found a voice. Steve, blinking through tears, finally spoke. "Why not?" His voice was a whisper, soft enough to cut glass. Jungkook's fingers curled around the armrest of his seat. "He died before I debuted. I sang to a wall, to a practice mirror. Never to him." Steve's throat tightened. "Does your mother ever talk about it?" "She doesn't have to," Jungkook said. "She always leaves a chair empty when I perform on TV. Always the same one." A sniffle echoed from the audience. Someone sobbed quietly. The show had veered so far from its script that even the teleprompters had gone dark. Steve leaned back. "You're young. But that kind of hurt. How do you carry that?" Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his fingers, flexed them, and then finally said, "I don't carry it. I hide it. In my lyrics. In my voice. In the way I scream into the mic at the end of a concert." Steve's voice broke. "That's why it feels different. Your voice." A long pause. Jungkook smiled faintly. "Pain is a better vocal coach than money ever was." Backstage, the staff was scrambling. The director whispered, "We're off script. Ratings will go nuts. But should we cut to commercial?" "No," said the producer, eyes glued to the monitor. "This is gold. This is human." Steve wiped his face. "Jungkook, you just gave the realest answer I've ever heard on this show." Jungkook tilted his head. "You asked the realest question." They both laughed. Shaky, broken, beautiful laughter. The audience erupted in applause, not for a punchline, but for truth. And somewhere in the shadows of the studio, a stagehand stood frozen. One who had watched Jungkook for years and never once thought he'd see the day when the quiet one spoke of his father. A secret carved in silence, finally released. Later that night, Steve Harvey sat alone in his office, replaying the footage. Frame by frame, word by word. Jungkook's voice echoing in his head like a distant prayer. "My father never heard me sing." Steve didn't realize he was crying again. It wasn't just a story. It was a scar. And for the first time in decades, Steve wasn't just a host. He was a witness. The next morning, the internet was on fire. Clips of Steve Harvey tearing up mid-interview had already passed 10 million views. Jungkook's confession leaves Steve speechless, trended across every major platform. But what the world didn't know, what even Steve hadn't realized yet, was that the moment they all witnessed was only the beginning. because during a private production meeting hours before that now-viral interview, Steve had been handed a card he wasn't supposed to read aloud. "I wouldn't ask that if I were you," the junior producer had warned, her voice low as she passed the question on a folded cue card. It wasn't cleared. Steve had arched a brow. "Why not? It's personal." His team flagged it. Twice. Steve studied the words on the card and gave a slow, thoughtful nod. But during the show, when the moment came and their souls cracked open like thunder under pressure, Steve had made a choice. He asked it anyway. That forbidden question was never aired. The network cut the feed just before Steve leaned in again and said softly, "And if he were here now, what would you say to him?" What came next never made it past the live taping. Jungkook had gone still, so still that even the audience sensed the air shifting. He looked up slowly, almost deliberately, like a man stepping into a courtroom. Then he said it. "I would tell him that I'm sorry. That I loved someone he would have hated." Gasps. Real gasps. Audible ones. Not from fans. From crew. From Steve. From Jungkook's own translator, who lowered her headset in disbelief. Steve blinked. Loved. But Jungkook didn't stop. "I fell in love with someone he'd never approve of. And I kept it buried, like everything else." Steve hesitated. "You're not talking about a woman, are you?" Jungkook's silence was his answer. Backstage, alarms were going off. Not literal ones, but metaphorical red flags burning through the production crew's headsets. One senior exec grabbed her phone. "Shut it down," she snapped. "Now." We weren't supposed to go there. But it was too late. The silence in the studio had grown so heavy, so sacred. It was like entering a church mid-confession. No one dared interrupt. Steve leaned forward. "Do you want to talk about him?" Jungkook met his eyes. And for the first time, there was no smile, no performative warmth. Only the raw, wounded honesty of a man who had been silenced too long. "I was 17, Jungkook whispered. "He was older. Someone who trained me. He taught me to sing. He taught me to fight for what I believed in. But my father, he would have called it shame." A murmur rustled through the crowd like wind through dry grass. "And did you love him?" Steve asked gently. Jungkook's lip trembled. "I still do." The crew sat frozen. Even the camera operators had stopped breathing. But just then, crack. The stage lights flickered. Someone backstage tripped over a live wire, sending a minor jolt through the lighting system. The moment was interrupted. Temporarily. But not forgotten. After the taping, the network execs lost their minds. They called emergency meetings. Lawyers. Crisis teams. Sponsors started pulling calls. "What the hell was that?" One executive barked at the team. "Do you realize what he just did? He came out. On national television." "It wasn't broadcast," someone said weakly. "We cut the feed before he." "But the audience was there. You think no one recorded it?" And someone had. A fan seated in the back, who'd ignored the no recording rule, had captured the entire moment on a tiny hidden camera clipped to their lapel. And by the time the execs even started damage control, the raw footage had already leaked. It was everywhere. Social media erupted into chaos. Hashtag protect Jungkook. Hashtag Steve knew. Hashtag he loved him. Hashtag let him be. The fandom divided like a continental rift. Some screamed for privacy, others demanded the full episode. A third faction spun conspiracy theories about the identity of the man Jungkook once loved. But there was something darker bubbling beneath the surface, far more dangerous than online opinions. Back in Seoul, messages began flooding HYBE's internal servers. Anonymous ones. Threats. Demands. Ultimatums from conservative groups demanding disciplinary action against Jungkook for promoting immoral behavior on foreign media. And worse, there was someone from Jungkook's past who just watched that clip. Someone who had everything to lose if the truth came out. Steve Harvey was called into a meeting the next day with the network's legal department. "You violated your contract," said the stern woman in the gray suit. "You were told not to ask that question." "I asked what needed to be asked," Steve replied, arms folded. He was ready. You don't know what you've done. You've just started a war. Steve stood. Then maybe it's a war that needed to happen. Meanwhile, Jungkook was in his hotel room. Alone. He stared at the phone. And then, it buzzed. A single message from a blocked number. You told the world. I told you never to speak of me. Jungkook's fingers trembled as he set the phone down. He walked to the mirror, looked into his own eyes, and whispered, I wasn't the only one hiding. That night, Steve Harvey recorded a private message to Jungkook. He didn't post it. He didn't send it. He just saved it. In it, he said, you did something brave, something real, and whatever storm comes, you don't face it alone. Not anymore. But even Steve didn't know that the storm had already begun, and the one man Jungkook was trying to protect had just landed in Los Angeles. Unannounced. And he wasn't alone. The air in LAX was stale with travel and secrets. He stepped off the plane wearing a charcoal gray coat, collar high against the flash of cameras he suspected might appear. His black sunglasses were designer, deliberate. His walk was slow, calculated. Yet every movement suggested urgency buried beneath elegance. He hadn't set foot in America for over a decade. And yet here he was because of one sentence Jungkook said on television. No one recognized him yet. Not as the voice coach who had once trained under HYB's shadow. Not as the man who vanished just months before Jungkook's debut. Not as the man who had once whispered, don't ever tell them what we were. His name? Publicly erased. Files archived. Mentions scrubbed. An NDA signed under legal threat from people who feared scandal more than they feared truth. But now the truth was alive. And trending worldwide. Meanwhile, across Los Angeles, in a penthouse suite guarded by 2 HYB security agents, Jungkook sat frozen, clutching his phone like it might shatter. He's here. Jimin, on the other side of the room, blinked. Who? Jungkook's voice dropped to a ghost of itself. He saw the clip. He messaged me. Jimin stood, tense. Wait, Jungkook nodded. You told me he disappeared. That no one could find him. I was wrong. Jimin walked over and sat down beside him slowly, voice quiet. Does anyone else at the company know? Jungkook shook his head. They're too busy cleaning up the media chaos. They don't even know he exists anymore. But I do. Jimin stared at him. Are you scared? Jungkook didn't answer. He didn't need to. At the studio where Steve Harvey was filming a follow-up statement to the previous episode, an unexpected call came through. A receptionist waved to the producer. There's a man at the front. He says he's here to see Steve. About Jungkook. The producer froze. Who? He didn't give a name. Steve was in makeup, half his face powdered, when the assistant knocked. There's someone here. Says he has history with Jungkook. Said you'd know why it matters. Steve paused. Did Jungkook send him? No. Steve stood. Then I'll see him. They met in the hallway, the bright studio lights bleeding into cold shadows. The man removed his sunglasses. Steve's eyes narrowed. You're the one, aren't you? I never told him to say my name, the man replied. His voice was firm, but there was tremble in the edges. And I never wanted this. Then why are you here? Steve asked. Because he told the world about me, which means they'll start looking. And when they find me, I lose everything. Steve crossed his arms. Why didn't you show up years ago, when he was drowning alone? I was protecting him. Steve's tone darkened. Don't lie to me. You were protecting yourself. That night, HYB headquarters held an emergency board call. The CEO's voice echoed through the secured conference room. Jungkook's revelations have triggered diplomatic sensitivities. We have religious groups threatening to pull sponsorships. Politicians demanding statements. American networks offering exclusive deals to frame this as a bravery narrative. We are sitting on a bomb. One advisor leaned forward. Do we protect him or distance ourselves? Silence. Then, a younger board member cleared his throat. There's another option. Everyone turned. He slid a file onto the table. Find the man from his story. If we control him, we control the narrative. The room went deadly quiet. Across town, Jungkook's sweet phone rang again. He answered, voice low. Hello. It's me. Jungkook's chest tightened. Where are you? Watching. He walked toward the window, drew back the curtain. There, across the street, a dark sedan idled in the shadows. I didn't come here to ruin you, the voice said. But there are people looking for me now. Important people. And if they find out who I was to you. Jungkook's voice cracked. You were everything. Pause. Then the voice said, you were 17. Silence. I was 24. I should have walked away. But you didn't. No, the man replied. Because I loved you too. The next morning, the first unauthorized article dropped. A French Korean outlet published a leaked report detailing an unconfirmed relationship between Jungkook and a former coach, now believed to be in hiding. HYB scrambled. So did the legal team. The article was vague, no names, no proof, but the damage had begun. Armies erupted. Some furious, some supportive, many confused. The hashtags grew uglier. Hashtag Protect Jungkook was joined by hashtag Who was he? Hashtag Trainer Scandal. Hashtag Was he groomed? Jimin watched from his phone, fists clenched. He turned to Jungkook. You don't owe them your pain. Jungkook whispered. But he does. That same day, Steve Harvey made a decision. He booked a second episode. Same guest. Same chair. Same raw truth. He called Jungkook personally. I want you back. On the show. Jungkook hesitated. I'm not sure I can do that again. Steve's voice lowered. Then let's do it together. I'll sit beside you. But you're not hiding anymore. That night, the man from Jungkook's past received a message. A name. A flight number. A hotel room key code. And a final line. They're going to find you. Might as well tell your side before they rewrite it for you. He stared at the phone for a long time. Then he booked a cab. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he whispered the one sentence he never thought he'd say again. I'm coming back to him. The keycard slipped into the slot with a soft click. Room 1517. Downtown LA's most discreet penthouse suite. Booked under an alias HYB couldn't trace. No cameras in the hallway. No hotel staff on this floor. Everything arranged by someone who knew how to disappear, and more importantly, how to stay erased. The door opened. He stepped inside. And Jungkook was already waiting. He stood near the window, arms folded, back straight, face unreadable. The skyline glittered behind him like a galaxy made of glass and neon. But his eyes were fixed on the man who had once taught him to find his voice, then vanished the moment that voice got too loud. Jungkook spoke first. You weren't supposed to come. The man shut the door slowly. You weren't supposed to tell the world. Silence. Thick. Electric. Jungkook turned. Why now? Because I thought I buried you, the man said quietly. I thought I could live a life without ghosts. Jungkook took a step forward. You didn't bury me. You ran from me. I was 24, the man snapped. You were a kid. I wasn't a kid when you kissed me behind the practice room. Jungkook fired back. I wasn't a kid when you told me you'd wait for me after debut. I wasn't a kid when I woke up one morning and you were gone. Their voices ricocheted off the walls. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Jungkook whispered, eyes shining. You disappeared, and I couldn't say a word. I had to smile through it. I had to perform through it. I had to sit next to people on variety shows and act like I wasn't bleeding from a wound no one could see. The man's jaw clenched. I did it to protect you. You think the world would have let you debut if they knew you were in love with me? You didn't even ask me. Jungkook yelled. You just decided. I made the call you couldn't. No. You made the call you were too afraid to explain. They stared at each other. Then the man's voice broke. I watched every performance. Every tour. Every single live you did. You think I forgot you? Jungkook turned away. You didn't forget me. You just chose not to exist. Meanwhile, across the city, Steve Harvey walked into his production office like a man headed to war. The footage had leaked again. But not just the raw studio moment from before. This time it was a photo. A photo that wasn't supposed to exist. It showed Jungkook, years younger, backstage at a Korean showcase. Standing close, too close, smiling, hands almost touching someone whose face had been blurred, but not well enough. The resemblance was unmistakable. Steve's assistant looked pale. Sir, Twitter's collapsing. He looked at the screen. Hashtag Jungkook scandal. Hashtag he was underage. Hashtag Steve Harvey knows. Steve's fingers curled into a fist. This is a hit job. From who? I don't know. But someone's trying to rewrite what happened before the truth can breathe. Back in the suite, the man stepped closer. I didn't just disappear, Jungkook. I was forced out. Jungkook turned. What? They threatened to destroy me. My family. Said they'd leak doctored messages. Accuse me of grooming a trainee. Said they'd erase your shot at debut if I didn't leave the country. Jungkook's heart pounded. They? HYB's legal team, the man said. I signed papers. Confidentiality agreements. They paid me to go away. And I took the deal. Because they said if I didn't, they'd ruin you. Silence. Rage crept across Jungkook's face like a storm. They told me you just quit. I know. Jungkook's hands trembled. They lied to both of us. Outside, in a black SUV parked near the hotel, a photographer zoomed in with a long lens, trying to capture through the floor-to-ceiling window. But the glass was polarized. All he could see were silhouettes, two figures. The chair next to Jungkook was empty for now. The second taping of the Steve Harvey show was set to begin in 30 minutes, but already the studio was in a silent, simmering panic. The control room was lit up like Christmas. Teleprompters were turned off. The script discarded. The audience had signed new NDAs and surrendered their phones. This wasn't just a show. This was a detonator. And Steve Harvey? He was pacing. Do we have confirmation? Is he coming? The producer nodded slowly. Yes. They just entered the parking garage. Together. Steve paused, ran a hand over his face. Lord, give me the words. Downstairs, in the VIP holding area, Jungkook sat calmly, dressed in all black. Sharp blazer. No jewelry. His face was bare, no concealer, no illusion. Just the weight of the world carried like armor. Beside him sat him. The man who had, until 2 days ago, officially never existed. Today, his name would be said out loud for the first time in 7 years, Seo Taehyung. Once a rising star in the Korean vocal training world. Now the center of global controversy. He wore a navy turtleneck. His hair was longer now, but his presence hadn't changed. It was quiet, magnetic, dangerous. Are you ready for this? Taehyung asked. Jungkook looked straight ahead. No. A beat passed. Then he added, that's why I have to do it. Backstage, 2 members of the Steve Harvey security team argued. They're gonna crucify him, man. Both of them. That's not our job. No, but it should be someone's. The doors opened. The room went breathless. Jungkook stepped into the studio first. Not a sound. Then Taehyung followed and the silence deepened into something surgical. The camera lights flared. The audience, carefully selected for balance, fans, scholars, LGBTQ leaders, a few neutral journalists, watched in as the 2 men crossed the floor together. They didn't touch. They didn't smile. They just walked. To the chairs. Jungkook sat first. Then, for the first time since the scandal broke, Taehyung Seo sat beside him. Steve Harvey walked out seconds later. The applause was brief. Nervous. Hesitant. He took a deep breath. Today, he said slowly, you are going to hear a story that was never supposed to see the light of day. About control. About shame. About the machinery behind fame. And about love, the kind they tried to bury. He looked directly at Jungkook. And I want you to know, this floor? This chair? It's yours. Speak your truth. However it comes. Jungkook nodded. His voice was calm. Measured. I'm not here to cry. I'm not here to explain myself. I'm here to tell the truth because the lie nearly killed me. A low murmur passed through the crowd. Then he turned slightly to face Taehyung. And the world leaned in. I was 17. He was 24. Jungkook began. We were in a practice room. Everyone else had left. I was frustrated. Tired. Struggling with a high note that wouldn't land. And he stayed. He looked down for a moment. He didn't touch me. He didn't cross a line. Not then. He just listened. And for the first time, someone didn't treat me like a product. He treated me like a person. Taehyung stared straight ahead, unreadable. Steve leaned forward. When did it change? Jungkook's mouth trembled, just barely. 6 months later. I initiated it. A gasp in the audience. I kissed him. I was still a trainee. He told me it was a mistake. That it couldn't happen again. But it did. Because I wanted it to. Steve looked to Taehyung. And you let it happen? Taehyung finally spoke. His voice was smooth, restrained, precise like someone used to control. But it quivered at the edges. I didn't just let it happen. I fell in love with him. Backstage, HYB's crisis director watched the feed with white-knuckled fists. His phone buzzed nonstop calls from Seoul, Tokyo, Dubai, New York. The company had already lost 2 brand deals in under an hour. Cut the feed, someone suggested. We can't, the legal director said. That's a breach of contract with the network. So what do we do? The answer came in the form of a whispered message from an assistant who had just returned from the bathroom, pale-faced. Someone from dispatch is in the audience. The blood drained from the director's face. Back in the studio, Steve asked the question everyone feared. Did HYB know? Taehyung laughed. Bitter. Broken. Of course they knew. Jungkook leaned in. They summoned him for a confidential meeting. Told him to sign papers saying he never trained me. That he was just a temporary consultant. Then they threatened him. Steve blinked. Threatened how? Jungkook looked up. They said if he didn't disappear, they'd leak a fake story that I'd been sexually manipulated. That he had groomed me. Someone in the audience cried out. Another person whispered, monsters. They told me if I ever mentioned him, Jungkook continued, they'd force me to publicly deny it and apologize for confusing my fans. He looked at Steve. I've spent years pretending it never happened. But every time I walked into a studio, I saw him. Steve was silent. Then he said, Taehyung, why didn't you speak out earlier? Taehyung swallowed hard. Because they told me if I did, they'd ruin him. And I believed them. At that exact moment, social media imploded. Because Dispatch had posted everything. The footage. The leaked HYB documents. Screenshots from the email blackmail. Surveillance images of Taehyung being escorted out of the building in 2017. Even video clips showing him training Jungkook back when he was only 15. The headline read, The love story they erased, BTS Jungkook and the ghost coach. And at the bottom, why did HYB lie for so long? The public snapped. Within 30 minutes, 48 trending hashtags blanketed the globe. Hashtag apologize to Jungkook. Hashtag justice for Taehyung. Hashtag HYB exposed. Hashtag we see you. Hashtag he was never alone. Inside the studio, Steve said his final words. You both just changed everything. Not just for you. For every person who's been silenced. Shamed. Broken. You stood up and said, no more. The audience stood in thunderous applause. Some crying. Some shaking. Taehyung reached for Jungkook's hand. For a moment, just a second, they held on. And in that fragile, defiant gesture, the lie finally died. But as they walked backstage, hands parting just before the curtain. An old man in a suit waited in the shadows. An original shareholder. A buried HYB co-founder. He looked at Jungkook and whispered, you think this is over? Jungkook didn't flinch. No, he replied. But you're next. The man in the shadows had a face Jungkook remembered only in fragments. Not from music shows. Not from company dinners. But from the first day he signed with HYB. Back then it had a different name, a smaller office, and only 2 floors. Jungkook was 15. The man in the shadows was the first to speak during that orientation before Bang Si-hyuk even entered the room. He had smiled, then offered a pat on the shoulder and said, Your voice will change the world if you don't ruin it before it starts. Back then, Jungkook thought it was encouragement. Now he understood it was a warning. And that man, now standing under the exit sign, half his face bathed in red, wasn't just a forgotten executive. He was the one who created the blacklist. The one who erased Taehyung. You shouldn't have done this, the man said coldly, stepping forward. Jungkook stood his ground, Steve Harvey's team surrounding him like an impromptu wall of human defense. I was a child, Jungkook said, voice low, firm. And you made sure no one could protect me. You had everything. I had a lie. And now you've turned it into a spectacle, the man said, gaze slicing through the dim light. You've burned a billion-dollar empire to the ground for one forgotten name. From behind, Taehyung's voice cut in. I wasn't forgotten. You just hid me. The man didn't flinch. And I'll do it again. Because what you two represent. It's not love. It's risk. And this industry doesn't survive risk. Jungkook's face twitched. Maybe it shouldn't survive. You arrogant, the man hissed, stepping closer. But Steve Harvey stepped in between them. You want to talk empire? Let's talk humanity first. The man sneered. This isn't your country, Harvey. Steve didn't blink. Pain doesn't need a passport. Within hours, the footage of Jungkook and Taehyung's joint interview had broken every record in broadcast history. YouTube servers slowed. News anchors abandoned other topics mid-segment. The United Nations issued a statement of support. But with the light came shadows. Conservative lawmakers in South Korea began drafting content morality proposals. Certain networks banned BTS-related broadcasts pending investigation. Anti-fan forums exploded with doxing attempts, some even leaking addresses believed to belong to Taehyung's family. HYB's stock dropped 28% by nightfall, and a private audio file surfaced leaked by an insider. It was a board meeting recording from years ago. A voice, likely the same man from the shadows, said, "If Jungkook breaks, we'll blame the trainer. Frame him. Grooming, misconduct, emotional manipulation. Whatever sticks." It was dated 3 weeks before Taehyung left Korea. Back at their safe house, a secure location provided by one of Steve's closest allies, Jungkook and Taehyung sat across from each other in a room heavy with silence. Neither spoke. Outside, fans had begun leaving flowers by the gate. Notes. Candles. But inside, they didn't know how to process this. Taehyung finally whispered, "I should go." Jungkook looked up, eyes dim. "To where?" "Back underground. Where I belonged." "You didn't belong there," Jungkook said firmly. "They put you there. I'm ruining your career." Jungkook gave a hollow laugh. "You think I care about career? They built a version of me so polished, so profitable that I started believing he was real. That I didn't hurt. That I didn't feel." His voice cracked. "And now I remember. That night, Steve received a call. From an unknown number. A voice, female, sharp, said, 'Tell Jungkook to stop, or we'll release the footage from the Tokyo incident.'" Steve went quiet. "I don't know what the hell you're talking about." The voice paused. 3 years ago. Tokyo Dome. After the show. We have the security cam footage. Of Jungkook crying. Of Taehyung showing up at the back entrance. Of their fight. The breakdown. The kiss." Steve leaned forward. "You release that footage and you validate everything they've said. You confirm it all." "Exactly," the voice replied coldly. "But this time we control the narrative." The call ended. Steve exhaled. His hands were shaking. The next morning, Dispatch dropped a nuclear story. Exclusive, Tokyo Dome meltdown, leaked footage of Jungkook's secret lover. The footage was grainy, security camera black and white, but clear enough to identify the figures. Jungkook in tears. Taehyung appearing in the shadows. Their hug. The argument. And then the kiss. The public gasped. The internet imploded. But something strange happened next. Army didn't cancel him. They didn't shame him. Instead, they began flooding the comments with one phrase. Let him love. Let him feel. Let him live. And then, at exactly noon, Taehyung broke his silence. He posted a single story on Instagram. A black screen. White text. "We've known all along. And we stand by him. With love, always." 3 million likes in 5 minutes. But back at HYB, the chaos wasn't contained. Because now another former trainee had come forward. And he had receipts. Chat logs. Audio messages. Photos. Of similar treatment. Of being erased. Of loving someone inside the system and being punished for it. The company's walls were crumbling. One executive resigned that afternoon. Another fled the country. That evening, Steve called Jungkook. "We're being sued." Jungkook sighed. "I figured. You've got 36 hours to prepare for a court injunction. Then let's use them." "For what?" Jungkook stared at his reflection in the mirror. "Let's go back to the place where it all started." Steve paused. "Seoul?" Jungkook nodded. "No cameras. No press. Just the place they took him away." Steve's voice dropped. "Are you ready for that?" Jungkook smiled softly. "I've never been more ready." Across the ocean, a private jet fueled in silence. A new war had begun. But this time it wasn't about scandal. It was about taking back the truth and burning the shame they'd been forced to carry. Once and for all, the jet touched down at Incheon under an alias. No red carpet. No press release. No flashing lights. Just the silence of 3 a.m. and the cold metallic breath of Seoul in early spring. Jungkook stepped off the aircraft first, his boots hitting the tarmac with the weight of a man walking back into a country that once sold him to the world as a perfect son, a perfect idol, a perfect machine. Behind him, Taehyung exited with slower steps, his first time back in South Korea in nearly 7 years. As their feet met the ground, it felt less like arrival and more like confrontation. A black SUV was waiting for them, no logos, no drivers in suits. Just a plain vehicle manned by a former bodyguard Jungkook trusted more than anyone on HYB's payroll. His name was Jeon, and he didn't speak as he opened the door. He just nodded once. "Where to first?" he finally asked. Jungkook answered without hesitation. "Cheongdam, the training center." The drive was eerily quiet. Seoul at night had always buzzed, neon reflected off wet streets, convenience store lights blinking like lazy stars, but now it felt like a ghost town built on secrets and debt. Taehyung stared out the window, his breath fogging up the glass. "I never thought I'd see this city again." "You deserve to," Jungkook said. "No," Taehyung replied. "I deserve prison. Or erasure. But not closure." "You didn't do anything wrong," Jungkook said sharply. "I crossed a line." "You loved me," Jungkook snapped. They were the ones who turned that into a crime. The building hadn't changed. The HYB trainee complex was still a looming gray monolith, like a prison dressed as a palace. Jungkook stepped out first, Taehyung following. Jeon remained by the SUV, watching every corner. They walked to the back entrance, the old one, rarely used now. Jungkook reached out, punched in a code he hadn't used in years. It still worked. Click. The door swung open. And just like that, they were inside the place where it had all begun. They didn't turn on the lights. The hallways lit themselves with soft LED strips embedded in the walls. Motion sensor activated. The floors had been repolished, but the smell of old sweat, vocal spray, and processed air still lingered. Taehyung stopped at the first mirrored practice room. "This is where I told you to hold your breath before hitting high notes." Jungkook smiled faintly. "And where you held mine the first time we kissed." Taehyung lowered his eyes. "I wish I'd been stronger." "You were the only real thing I had," Jungkook said. And then, footsteps. Fast. Heavy. Coming from the far end of the hallway. They turned sharply. A figure emerged from the shadows. Bang Si-hyuk. No bodyguards. No entourage. Just him. Breathing hard. Eyes unreadable. "Well," he said. "I knew you'd come back." Jungkook didn't move. "I didn't come for you. You came for war. I came for answers." Bang nodded slowly. "Then let's talk like men. No press. No cameras. No spin." He gestured toward the executive lounge upstairs. Taehyung hesitated. Jungkook stepped forward. "No," he said. "We talk here. In this hallway. Where your silence broke me." Bang's face tightened. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to tell the truth," Jungkook said. "That you knew. That you sanctioned it. That you erased him to save your image." Bang tilted his head. "You think it was my choice? You think I wanted to break up one of the only things that made you human?" "You signed the papers," Taehyung cut in. "You lied." "I protected you," Bang snapped. "You would have been eaten alive." "I was." Jungkook screamed. "I was eaten alive. For years. And you let it happen." Bang's voice dropped. "I was threatened too. Government backers. Corporate sponsors. If I didn't make the story disappear, they'd blacklist us. All of us. Not just you, BTS." He stepped closer. "You want the truth? Fine. I sacrificed one man to protect 7. I made that call. And I'd make it again." Jungkook's chest heaved. Taehyung stood still, pale and still as stone. Bang continued. "You weren't just a trainee. You were a weapon. I couldn't let the world know that weapon had a soft spot. You were too valuable." "That's not protection," Jungkook whispered. "That's ownership. And it made you who you are," Bang said coldly. "Without that decision, there's no Jungkook. No stadiums. No world tours. Just a footnote in a scandal." Jungkook stared at him. Then smiled, faint, bitter. "I'd rather be a footnote than your property." At that moment, Taehyung pulled something from his jacket. A flash drive. He held it up. "This is the original training footage. Every lesson. Every note. Every moment you tried to delete. I kept it. All of it." Bang's face hardened. "You release that, you end his career. Again." "No," Jungkook said. "We start it. The real one." He looked at Taehyung. "Let's go." They turned, walking back down the hallway, steps echoing like gunfire. Bang didn't follow. He didn't need to. Because just then, outside, a protest had begun. Hundreds of armies. Silently. Holding candles. Holding signs. Some said let him live. Some said no more lies. And some simply said Taehyung. Back in the car, Jeon spoke quietly. "You sure this is the right way?" Jungkook looked out the window. For the first time. "I think so." Taehyung sat beside him, shaking. "You okay?" Jungkook asked. "No," he whispered. "But I'm not scared anymore." That night, Dispatch posted a final follow-up. A scanned copy of a handwritten letter. Signed by 5 former HYB executives. Confirming every manipulation, every silence, every threat. And by dawn, HYB released a statement. Short, chilling. Effective immediately, Jungkook's contract has been suspended pending legal review. We wish him well. The news broke. And the world stopped. But Jungkook didn't. Because the truth wasn't over. It had just gone independent. It was a brutal sunrise over the Han River. The water reflected red, almost prophetic, like Seoul itself had bled overnight. Jungkook stared at the city from the rooftop of a quiet guest house just outside Gangnam where the press hadn't yet found him. His eyes were hollow, bloodshot, too exhausted for sleep and too awake for peace. He scrolled his phone without reading, watched numbers rise like tidal waves, millions of reposts, billions of views, calls from world media, support hashtags in a dozen languages. But they meant nothing right now. Because he just lost everything he spent his entire life building. He had walked away from the stage that raised him. Or maybe it had pushed him off the edge and now he was just trying to land without shattering completely. Inside the room below, Taehyung sat on the floor, cross-legged, his back against the wall. He was reviewing the flash drive again. Footage of Jungkook, 16, barefoot, breathless, singing a raw version of a song that never made it past demo. You were always better before they polished you, Taehyung murmured. Jungkook entered quietly. It's hard to watch? No. It's sacred. And tragic. Jungkook crouched beside him, his voice low. They suspended me. Taehyung looked up. I know. It was only a matter of time. They'll try to erase me again. They can't. Not this time. Are you sure? No, Taehyung said. But I'm still here. The world was rioting with noise. Army fandoms organized global marches in support of Jungkook and Taehyung. From Sao Paulo to Berlin, from Cape Town to Tokyo, crowds gathered outside embassies, holding banners that read, "Love is not a scandal." They lied, he survived. Let artists be human. But not all of them were peaceful. In Seoul, an angry conservative group stormed the bigot building gates, demanding Jungkook be exiled, imprisoned, or cleansed from Korean entertainment. Police formed barricades. Tear gas was fired. A BTS mural was defaced overnight with red spray paint, shameful traitor. The country was splitting in two. And at the heart of the earthquake, Jungkook didn't flinch. That evening, a final blow was prepared behind closed doors. In a dark conference room within a skyscraper in Yongsan, HYB's crisis board gathered. The CEO, dressed in all black, stood before a monitor. We've attempted dignity. We've attempted silence. He wants war, he'll get it. One man at the table raised a hand. The public still leans in his favor. Every attempt to discredit him backfires. Then we don't discredit him, the CEO said. We destroy Taehyung. Another woman frowned. How? The CEO nodded to his assistant. She placed a file on the table. Photos. A forged confession. Screenshots of chat logs. Fabricated. Deadly. Sexual misconduct. Abuse of power. Emotional coercion. All pinned on Taehyung. We leaked this to a neutral third party, anonymous tip. No direct link to us. Button. It'll be enough to raise doubt, the CEO snapped. And once doubt exists, the world does the rest. At 2:14 a.m., the smear campaign began. An anonymous account posted a thread titled, "The Truth About Taehyung, What Jungkook Doesn't Know." Inside were blurred screenshots, a voice recording edited to suggest grooming, and an alleged testimony from another ex-trainee accusing Taehyung of manipulation and inappropriate intimacy. The thread exploded in minutes. People believed it. Or wanted to believe it. Because it was easier to shatter a man than to accept a system could fail so deeply. Taehyung read the thread in silence. Then calmly closed the laptop. Jungkook was pacing behind him. Furious. Shaking. I'll go public again, he said. I'll do a live stream. Expose them line by line. Taehyung stood. No. No? Taehyung stepped closer. They want you to go nuclear. They want you to make a mistake. Then they'll say you're unstable. Unfit. Dangerous. I won't let them use you against yourself. Jungkook's voice cracked. They're painting you as a predator. Taehyung touched his face. Gently. And I don't care. As long as you still know who I am. I do. But the world. Let them wonder, Taehyung said. They don't get to define me anymore. But someone else had other plans. A hacker collective known only as Ghostwire released a video. Distorted voice. Masked face. Pixelated background. To the people of Korea and the world, this is the truth HYB won't let you see. They dumped the entire archive. Original emails. Deleted footage. Security reports from 2017. A buried interview where Taehyung had been coerced by HYBE lawyers into signing a statement of voluntary resignation under duress. It was undeniable. It was warfare. And the internet changed sides again, this time decisively. Hashtag they framed him. Hashtag Taehyung was silenced. Hashtag Jungkook was right all along. Hashtag burn the empire. Back at the safe house, Jungkook's old phone rang. Unknown number. He picked up. Hello? A soft voice replied. You don't know me, but I was the trainee after you. And they tried to do to me what they did to you. Jungkook's heart stopped. Who are you? I can testify. I saved everything. But I'm scared. I need you to protect me. Jungkook whispered, you're not alone. Then help me. Please. The line went dead. Jungkook stared into space. Then turned to Taehyung. They were never after just us. An hour later, Steve Harvey arrived at the safe house. Not with cameras, but with people. Journalists. Activists, lawyers, and one senior Korean parliament member privately disgusted by HYB's political influence. They gathered in the living room. No fanfare, no script, just one goal. To take the fight public. Legally, globally, permanently. Jungkook sat at the head of the table. No longer a boy, not just a singer, not even just a survivor, but a weapon they could no longer control. I'm done playing their game, he said. Now we write our own rules. And outside the gates of the safe house, someone had lit candles. Dozens, then hundreds. By morning, the streets were glowing with vigil lights and banners. A quiet protest of solidarity. As if the entire city whispered the same thing. We see you. We believe you. Keep going. Inside, Jungkook pressed record on a live stream. No filters. No cuts. Just him. And the truth. And as the broadcast began to ripple across the world, one final message was posted by Ghostwire. If they try to silence him again, we'll burn the sky. The screen went black for 2 seconds. Then Jungkook appeared, no music, no graphics, no brand overlays. Just his face. Pale, serious, defiant. The live stream had barely been up for 5 seconds when the view count passed 3 million. By 10 seconds, it had reached 7. At 30, the server strained. HYB's legal team frantically emailed YouTube to suspend the stream. But it was mirrored, shared, rebroadcasted. Unstoppable. Because the world had already decided. This wasn't a scandal anymore. This was a reckoning. Jungkook leaned into the mic. This is not a press release. This is not an apology. He paused. This is a funeral. He let that hang. Then, for the system that tried to own me. That broke others. That devours truth to feed fame. Silence. Then his voice cracked slightly. I was trained to sing, dance, perform, and smile no matter what. But no one trained me to survive shame. They just made sure I had it. He inhaled. Looked dead into the lens. They told me I'd be nothing without them. That my voice belonged to the company. That love was a weakness. That I had to hide the person who made me human. His hands clenched slightly on the desk. That ends tonight. Within the safe house, the room was still. Steve Harvey watched from a corner, nodding slowly. He'd seen Raw before, but this was radioactive. Taehyung stood just behind the camera, barely breathing, as if any movement might break the moment. And then Jungkook reached under the desk and pulled out a folder. Thick. Worn. He held it up. These, he said, are internal records HYB never wanted you to see. They show how I was silenced. How Taehyung was erased. And how dozens of others, trainees, staff, even producers, were threatened, manipulated, or paid off. He opened the folder and slid out a single page. An email. On the screen behind him, it appeared in full. If Jungkook comes forward, we will manufacture consent. Use existing fan behavior to discredit him. Initiate mental health narrative as fallback. Frame CO as coercive. Issue denial from BTS. Then release new solo teaser to redirect attention. Jungkook tapped the paper. That was sent before I ever came forward. They were ready to destroy me before I said a word. The comments section burned like wildfire. They planned the cover-up in advance. He was a product to them. Protect Jungkook. Protect Taehyung. Boycott HYB. We're done pretending. And then the live stream froze. Just for half a second. A glitch. Then another. But Jungkook didn't blink. He smiled faintly. Trying to shut me down? He raised another page. This one, a resignation letter. Signed. Dated. By the very executive who had threatened him in the hallway backstage after Steve Harvey's show. This letter says everything. He admits he was instructed to erase Taehyung. That he received bonuses for pushing me into company-aligned romantic optics. that he oversaw social media manipulation to manage public perception. Jungkook dropped the paper onto the desk. The world deserves to know that what you see on stage isn't always real. And what you don't see backstage, that's where the damage begins. Suddenly, Steve's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Eyes widened. He stood, walked over, whispered in Jungkook's ear. They've issued a warrant. Jungkook blinked. On what grounds? Steve hesitated. National defamation. Threat to economic stability. Violation of contract law. Jungkook looked back to the camera. They're trying to make me a traitor now. His smile widened cold. Lethal. Let them. Outside, sirens. 3 unmarked vehicles approached the safe house. Police. But not standard units. Private government security, likely acting on behalf of HYB's political ties. Inside, Taehyung turned to Steve. We need to go. No, Steve said. He finishes. Jungkook remained seated. Before they come through that door, I want to say this. He stared at the lens. I'm not the only one. He pressed a button. The screen split. A second camera feed appeared. Another room. Another face. The former trainee who had called Jungkook days ago. Then another. A former vocal coach. Then another. A marketing manager who quit in 2019. 6, 8, 12. Faces. Names. One by one. Each of them holding papers. Each of them ready. And then the feed cut. Dead. Every major platform, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, blacked out the stream. But by then it was too late. It had already been downloaded, mirrored, spread to Reddit, Discord, Telegram, torrent sites. Jungkook's words were now wildfire on the wind. The door of the safe house burst open. Uniformed officers stormed in. Jungkook stood calmly. Steve stepped between them. You're making a mistake. One officer snarled, he's under arrest. For telling the truth? Steve said. For national disruption. But Jungkook raised his hands willingly. Let them take me. No, Taehyung growled. I won't let them touch you. You have to, Jungkook whispered. Because they want to provoke us. They want a scandal. Not a movement. As he was cuffed, Jungkook looked Taehyung in the eyes. Don't let them erase me again. Taehyung was frozen. Then nodded. I won't. They dragged Jungkook into a black car. The street was lined with people. Fans. Press. Haters. Supporters. But no one moved. No one threw anything. They just held up their phones. And filmed. Documented. For witness. At 3:11 a.m. Ghostwire posted one final message. They took him. But the system is bleeding. And we're not done. Underneath, a video appeared. Not of Jungkook. But of Taehyung. Sitting alone. In front of a camera. I was once erased, he said. But I'm still here. And now I'm going to show you everything they didn't want you to see. He held up the flash drive. This is no longer ours. It belongs to the people. The screen faded to black. And a final phrase burned into it. They made him a star. Now he's something they can't control. He's the revolution.